Mmm. That is a good cup of coffee. Greetings, ghosts and ghouls, and welcome back to 50k in 30 days. I'm your host, as always, the UndeadWriter, and today it is day 3. We are still chugging along in NaNoWriMo. So first things first, the update. At 3,500 words, should have been 4,000, but 500 words off. It's okay. I can make it up in the back end. So story's coming along. I'm having some bit of difficulty of where I'm trying to go with things. I went back and started detailing some of the cities, which kind of works out for today's episode since we'll be talking about world building. But I went back and started detailing some of the cities, some of the people, because where I'm at currently, when I last left off the story, our heroes were showing up in an important city. So I decided to kind of go back and kind of flesh out that city a bit. The problem that I'm having currently with the story is when I originally came up with the idea for the story years ago, and I kind of laid it all out. I'm a very ambitious writer. Like, I'm overly ambitious when I come and plan things. So I wanted it to be one book, like just one story. But fortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case now. I'm starting to feel that the story wants to be more than just one. It wants to be told in 3 parts, is what I'm feeling right now. And there actually are 3 locations or so, or things that are happening that I feel like, okay, you know what? These could probably be into 3 different separate stories, and I can give them more time to... You don't want to rush things. Like, I feel like I'll talk about this in more details in a future vlog, about single story, or singular novels and trilogies and stuff like that, but you have to listen to your story. If your story wants to be one, it will tell you. It'll say, don't leave it in there for too long. But if it needs to marinate a bit, it needs to kind of go through the paces, if it needs more time to develop characters, to develop your world, and it's like, listen, I need more than one book to do this. You gotta listen. A lot of authors have done very similar things. I mean, Song of Ice and Fire, I believe George R.R. Martin originally wanted the series to be 3 books, and then 4. Now it's up to 7, because he had to keep pushing it back because the story that ultimately wanted to be told, it needed more time. So listen to that part of your head, or your heart, or whatever analogy you would like to use. So, speaking about creating a world, today's vlog lesson or so is going to be on world building. One of my favorite aspects of writing is world building. I think I spend more time creating the world of my story than I sometimes spend writing it, because I love creating things, because it's just based on what I love learning about humans, history, civilization, stuff like that. Some people prefer focusing on characters, and that's great. Other people do love creating their world, and that's also great. It all depends on your story. So let's talk about purpose. What is the purpose of actually spending time world building? I mean, like, obviously you should create a world if you're going to be using a fantasy world, but what's the purpose in actually sitting down and creating it? Like, why don't you just do this while you're writing the story? Well, the easiest answer is for structure. You want to sit down and create the world and at least have a detailed idea of how the world functions, so that you have rules that you can follow when you write your story. Now, I get it, especially from you pantsers, you're like, rules? I don't want any rules. And I get it, you don't want something to stifle your creativity, but think about our world. Our world has rules. It has laws of physics. It has biological rules. It has chemical rules that the world has to follow. Yes, there are times, especially if you're going to go to quantum mechanics and stuff, where things kind of break, but I'm not a scientist, and we're not here to talk about the actual minuscule parts of science, but the world has rules. If I were to pick something up, let's say this empty water bottle, if I let it go, the laws of gravity state that it will drop. And it does. It doesn't just flow up already, because those rules are baked into our reality. And that's the purpose of world building, is to create these rules so that your characters have to follow, so your readers can follow it, so that there's some kind of something. And it's not just for basic rules of, gravity and stuff. It's just onto history, culture. Like, you have to know the history of a specific culture in your story. so you know how those characters will react to one another. And yes, I understand that makes it feel like, well, it seems like world building is mainly a plotter thing, and to be honest, yes, it is a plotting thing, because you are planning something out. You can world building as a pantser, though. A lot of pantsers do world build when they're in the midst of writing. I mean, I did most of my world building, since I do a mixture of both. I wrote my story first. I sort of explore this unknown world at first. Then I stopped and created the rules. So you can do it as a plotter or a pantser or both. You just have, but just understand that it is extremely important especially if you're doing a fantasy world. If you're doing our world, you know, you get a little bit of leeway because you already have most of it. Like, our world is already mapped out and stuff. You just have to do whatever tweaks you're going to be making to fit your story. If you're creating a fantasy world or an alien world or whatever, you're going to want to sit down and actually figure out the world that you're creating. Even if your readers don't see beyond a tip of the iceberg that is the rich history of your world, you still have to put in the time and effort into actually creating that world. So, what are some ways that you can actually start creating the world? Well, there's different ways to start. I know some people enjoy creating maps, for example. They like to sit down with a pen and paper or some kind of program and kind of begin drawing out the world, creating the countries, creating the cities, things like that. They have to have a visualization of what the world looks like, and then they start populating it. Some other ways are to create the history. This is usually how I end up starting creating the world. I create the history, the timeline, the beginning, the end, figuring out how the world was created, figuring out how everything sort of came into place, the different types of people. So a lot of people create the history first, create the timeline of their story, and then they start creating they draw out the map or whatever, or at least have a visualization, or they write down where everything in their world is. You can also go by, again, civilization. You can actually create different countries first and then worry about history, stuff like that. So, I mean, all of those, they all work together. In a way, you're going to have to do all of them in some capacity, but start off with the one that you like first. Some people like to actually work with their characters first. And, like, they'll create their characters, and then they create the world around the main cast of characters, especially if it's a character-driven story. You'll create your characters, and then you just shape the world around them. And that's a perfectly fine way of doing it. And again, it all depends on the focus of your story. If your story is character-driven, or the main characters are the important part, then create the characters first, and then build a world around them. If you have an interesting history or time, create the history first and build around them. If you have a world in your head already, draw that out. You're going to have to do all of them in parts in some way. They all come together as a whole. But figure out which one you like to start off with, and that can help generate ideas for the rest of the things, the other ways in order to build your world. Now, what are some tools that you could use to actually build your world? Well, there's actually a lot of different kind of sites and devices and things that you can use. It all depends on exactly what it is that you're trying to create. I know some people use certain websites in order to create maps, for example. Like, there is Incarnate, which is a free website that lets you kind of create a map and put things here and there. It is free, so there are some limitations, but it sort of gives you a generalization of what you should be doing. If you're more artistic, you know, pen and paper is always a good way to go, or using a tablet, actually, you know, drawing out the world, or using a variety of programs like, I mean, I've seen some people use Photoshop, some people have used Adobe Illustrator in order to create their maps. There is one website that I'm currently reading and trying to, in order to create an actual physical map, because I've made maps of my world by hand, and I've been looking at other ways to kind of make a better visual representation. There's a website that I found it's called Madness of a Modern Writer, and this a person has like steps on like what free programs you can download in order to create a map, and has a bunch of tools and instructions and stuff like that. And I'll have a link to both Incarnate and into Madness of a Modern Writer. I'll have links to those two sites in the description below. There are also some other materials that I like using. I don't have the book with me, unfortunately. I'm pretty sure I will have a picture show up over here. It's called Writing Fantasy and Science Fiction. It's a book that I have been reading through. It kind of gives me a lot of the tips that I've learned on how to world build, things about like the rules of magic and science. If you're going to have magic in your story, you need to have a rule of how the magic in your story works, and you have to stick to it. If magic is formed by people hurting themselves, like cutting themselves or whatever, like cutting their hand and the blood is used to make magic, then that has to be consistent. You have to know the limitations. Even if you don't tell the readers the limitation, you need to know it to make sure that you don't pull some kind of nonsensical thing and people are going to call out on it. Because when people realize, like, oh hey, yeah, everyone needs to use a wand to cast magic, and it's never been established that people can use magic without a wand, and all of a sudden someone does it and it's not even addressed, people are going to call out on that plot hole. And you want to have as little plot holes in your story as possible. So yeah, Writing Fantasy and Science Fiction, a really good book. It has a bunch of information, even down to really minuscule things like different types of trade and jobs that people would have in medieval times, or things like different names and ideas of how to create races and stuff like that. So it's a really good book. I definitely recommend you check it out to help you create your world. There are also other things. I have even other websites. Donjon is the name of the site. Really fantastic tool. Helps you create. It actually helps create a randomly generated map. You kind of just put a little bit of information, like how many percentage of oceans you want in the map or whatever, and it will go ahead and generate it for you. It's absolutely incredible what it can do. And I've used it a few times to just kind of randomly create a world and just see. It also has some other things. It lets you create cities and towns. It has the ability to like, it even tells you based on the population size when you create a city, how many percentages are bakers, artisans, guards, things like that. It can figure out like how many castles are in a kingdom based on the size and the population. Forts. If you're creating a kingdom, it'll tell you how many cities it would have. You can tweak out, and you can go to each town and kind of modify it. It's really cool. The site was mainly for games like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. So if you are into that, it does have means of how to generate dungeons and conflict or whatever. But you can definitely use it for your writing. And I know a lot of these tend to be more fantasy-esque. That tends to be my preferred genre. But you can use these for sci-fi stories. You just kind of have to tweak them a bit. And honestly, at the very end, you can always Google things and put city generator, world generator, and you will find a host of links that will help you out. One other tool that I like, I haven't really used it for any of my current stories, but I have played this before, and it has come up with very interesting ideas. It's a game, a tabletop RPG game called Microscope. It is really fun. I will put a link in the description below so you guys can check it out. I also have links as well for everything that I pretty much talked about, all the other sites. I'll have links in the description below for all those stuff. But it's an interesting game. All you need is a pen for each player and a stack of index cards. And you're basically creating this timeline of events and stuff, and role-playing some of these events throughout history, jumping throughout time, and basically creating a world with your friends. And it's incredible. Like, I played it with my roommates, and it was some of the most fun I've had in a very long time. And it pushed them all into really thinking out of the box and really jumping into roles that they've never really been into, and thinking in certain ways and creating the story. And it's pretty incredible how it's three of us all kind of battling in order to create this timeline, and it creates some really interesting things. Some things are goofy, but I think overall you might be able to play this game with some friends and then take some really good nuggets here and there, some really interesting stuff. So I definitely recommend you check it out. So, to wrap up this vlog, let me know, what are some of your favorite fantasy or sci-fi or just made up world? Like, what worlds do you enjoy reading about, or having read about, or learning about, or whatever? It doesn't have to be just based on any book you've read. It can be video games, it can be movies, just any type of world that you find interesting, that you love the lore of the world and the makeup of it. If I had to choose my favorite, I have two. So One of them would be just a personal favorite. I'm a big fan of the Legend of Zelda video game series. A huge fan, and I do enjoy, even though sometimes it's pretty vague, I do enjoy exploring and coming up with theories and looking at the world of Hyrule where the games take place, or the majority of the games take place. I really do love the world, and I feel like there's so much more that can be done with it. Very close to it is Golarion, which is the setting for the Pathfinder tabletop games. The Golarion is basically Earth, and it is so diverse. Like, countries are a variety of a bunch of different fantasy ideas, from like gothic horror to like forever winter Russian kind of landscape to like an India, like Arabia Night kind of thing, to like a ghost kingdom, to Atlantis, to a variety of different things, and it's all living together in this one world, and it's really fascinating. I love reading the lore. So let me know in the comments below what world, fantasy, sci-fi, made up, whatever, books, video games, movies, TV show, whatever you like, let me know in the comments below which is your favorite. Alright, so today's book recommendation, I don't actually have the physical book with me, unfortunately, because I'm actually not home for most of this week, somewhere else, so a lot of my actual books are not with me. But today's book recommendation is The Demon King by, let's see here, by Cinda Williams Chima. I haven't pronouncing the last name right. But yeah, The Demon King, it is the first in a 4-part series called The Seven Realms. The story is an interesting one, actually. It focuses on a young boy by the name of Han Alistair, who discovers 3 underage wizards who are essentially setting fires to the forest where he lives with the shaman faction. There's an interesting thing with the wizards in the story. The world was destroyed almost like 1,000 years ago by a particular wizard by the name of the Demon King. After the whole war and the Demon King was stopped or whatever, there had to be kind of a probation placed on the wizards because they were still useful, but they needed to make sure they weren't destroying everything. Now, wizards actually use an amulet in order to cast their spells instead of a wand. And the shaman group is actually the ones who now create the amulets for the wizards and make sure that they have like a stopping point to prevent the wizards from getting too powerful. So it's an interesting checks and balance between all the wizard group, the regular non-magical queendom group, and the shamans. It's really interesting. So Hans takes the amulet from one of the wizards so the wizard doesn't attack him back. And then he finds out very early on in the story that there is a dark history to this amulet. And so this sets off a chain of events which leads Hans into the entire kind of history of this entire world, and leading him into the main city where the capital of the queendom. On the other side of the scale, you have the princess of the queendom, which is actually called Fellsmarch, I believe. And she essentially has her own battles and her own darkness she has to fight in order to protect life over there. And it's really interesting. It's one of those stories where it jumps between these two characters who have essentially 2 different plots going on, and they're coming to not necessarily heads, but they're sort of they're gonna cross paths and stuff like that. And it's interesting to see, kind of read on one end and then jump to the other and kind of see these 2 parallels. And it actually influenced me a lot with some of my other story ideas on how to jump between different characters and tell different stories interweaving into the same book. It's really interesting, so I definitely recommend you guys check it out. I'll have a link as well in the description below so you can check order it from Amazon or anything like that. So I don't know what tomorrow's lesson will be about. I'm gonna have to spend part of today figuring that stuff out. But thank you very much, you guys, for watching. If you are enjoying these episodes, please give me some feedback below. Answer the question. Let me know if you're enjoying this. Anything else you guys want me to do. These vlogs are not super constructed because they are daily vlogs meant for me to do NaNoWriMo. And because of NaNoWriMo, I don't have a lot of time to really plan things and script things or whatever. Hopefully, once NaNoWriMo is over and I start making this a weekly kind of segment for the channel or something like that, I can be a bit more structured and more helpful. But let me know in the comments below, and if you are enjoying it, please give this video a like. It at least lets me know that people are watching and enjoying them. And if you want more content, hit that subscribe button, and you'll be getting more vlogs every day. Alright? Well, thank you very much for you guys for watching. I have to go right now. Take care.